I mean, a good example might be how nowadays you can be arrested and held for an inordinately long amount of time without charge. Because why? Because people are afraid of terrorists. And the government panders to this fear by allowing basic human rights to be undermined. Never mind that people have a right not to be held without trial. Never mind that people have a right for their cases to be introduced into the justice system, into the courts within a reasonable amount of time. We just want to appease people. And we want to appease our own security forces who are scared, who themselves don't want to have to carry the can if something goes wrong, who are not willing to admit that there are certain situations they really just can't control. Or consider the case of a 16-year, was it 16? An underage girl, and underage now apparently means 18, who sent a photo message of herself naked to her boyfriend. And because she was under 18, that was classed as child pornography. And she was classed as a child pornographer. And I believe she was in fact charged and convicted. This is under our new child protection laws. How are they protecting children by imprisoning them? I don't know if she did receive imprisonment, to be honest. But presumably, having committed a sex crime, she now has to sign the sex offenders register. And presumably will have to do so for the rest of her life. Except, thank heavens, they've now recently been a ruling by the High Court, or whatever court it is, the new one, the one that's basically replacing the law court of the Lords. The Supreme Court, that's it. And, well, they've ruled that it's not legal to have a register that people are on for life without review. And rightly so, too. And now, in principle, people can have their names removed from the sex offenders register, and hopefully this poor under 18-year-old girl will be able to have her name removed at some point. And we've just become a hysterical nation. There was a time when I think it was The Sun or some similar lads magazine ran a special edition because one of their favourite glamour models had just turned 16, and now she was 16. They didn't have to show only underwear pictures of her, they could show her topless. And, you know, okay, place aside the sleaziness of lads magazines in general. It wasn't a lad's newspaper, you know. Place aside that altogether, we've got a lot more bizarre in our views of young people. It's like, protect the children. And in our quest to nanny young people, we've restricted their freedoms and our freedoms and persecuted people who haven't done anything seriously wrong, like sending naked pictures of themselves to their boyfriends. And we've criminalized them. We have criminalized people for doing things that seem perfectly natural to them. Maybe naughty, but certainly not things that deserve them to be placed on a lifelong register. And I just don't approve of our justice system and the way it's being used as a political tool. I don't approve of how incredibly important principles of justice are being undermined, like mens rea. That's Latin for guilty mind, and it's what a lawyer would term the principle that someone should have been aware that they were doing something illicit, something that was wrong. They were aware that they were breaking a law. Now, the government doesn't have to prove mens rea anymore in certain cases. I think the first law of this sort was littering. They said that it would be too difficult to prove mens rea in littering. It would be too difficult to prove the intent to litter, because someone could always argue that their hand slipped or that it fell out of their pocket. So if someone was actually brought up for charges of littering, they would walk away every time. And that just seems a lazy, slovenly way of trying to deal with crime. Let's remove the burden of proof that someone actually meant to do something wrong, because that's too hard to prove. as if something being hard to prove was justification for being able to prosecute someone for it without having being able to prove it. And now child pornography is very much the same thing, which now includes not only actual pictures of children or video images of children, it includes synthetic pictures of children, drawings or animations or pretty much any image, be it of an actual child or anything, can be considered to be pornographic now. Now let's consider the consequences of this. I mean, suppose someone disagrees with your interpretation of how old a drawing of a child is. Suppose they can't agree, oh, this one looks about 18, but it could be younger, it could be older. Then hypothetically speaking, on someone else's subjective opinion of an image, you can be tried and prosecuted without them having to prove that you intended to do anything wrong. And that's a problem. Without mens rea, all they have to prove is that somebody else, some expert, thinks that it's an underage child. Okay? They don't have to prove that you did. There's no defense of reasonable doubt. There's no defense of grey areas of the grey, you know. There's no defense of saying, hey, you know, we differ in our opinion, but surely you can see that I believed that I was in the right. No, that's not a defense anymore. You don't have to prove someone actually intended to do something wrong, that they were malicious or willfully negligent. All you have to prove is that the crime X, it's highly emotive. We have this image or this file or this witness who says this happened, and because this person was connected with the incident, they're guilty by association. And if you want to know, you know, if you think that I'm making up that these laws could be abused and will be abused, let's be blunt, they will be, then consider the hysteria when the Internet Watch Foundation, a government-sponsored body that monitors the internet for inappropriate content, particularly violent or underage pornography, and then hands a list over to various internet service providers who voluntarily block it. Well, they banned an album. They banned a picture of the cover of an album, which had a naked girl with her genitals covered, and it was sold in public shops. No one found it so indecent that they refused to sell it. This album was on sale in front of everybody. You know, no policeman raided HMV saying, "Oh, you've got this album. It's child pornography. It's illegal." For thousands, you know, it was an old album. You know, but no one had any issue with it until the Internet Watch Foundation saw it and values changed and people started getting more sensitive about these things. And suddenly what had been non-pornographic, obviously not in a sexual situation, there's nudity without sexuality, you know, that is something that exists. This image suddenly became highly contentious and pornographic and had to be blocked. An album that many people probably have in their in their CD collection or in their attic somewhere, suddenly in the eyes of one government-sponsored body became child porn. And heaven forbid that the CPS were to agree with people on that one, were to take a similar view. Then people could be arrested because they own the wrong CD. Because something they bought from HMV 10 years ago has now been deemed, with our modern society and its modern values, to be pornographic.